The time has come to initiate a lockdown procedure within the school. As a junior in high school, I once had a dire need to use the restroom. There was a stomach bug going on because my stomach was in a lot of pain. While rushing to the restroom before it closed, I heard a whistling sound coming from the opposite end of the hall. As I approached the restroom, I realized the whistler was already inside. Considering I was going to blow the toilet up, I didn't give it much thought beyond the fact that it was a minor inconvenience for me. I hastened to this restroom and awkwardly finished my business there. That man, whom I barely noticed, remained in the restroom the entire time. About 10 minutes had passed since I entered, and God only knows how long he had been there before that. For obvious reasons, I wanted some privacy, so I began to suspect that it was a school janitor. While I was doing my business, he was singing and whistling the whole time. Yes, it's disgusting, but it did happen like that. When I was done in the stall, I walked out to wash my hands as quickly as possible while avoiding making eye contact with the man who was also using the bathroom. I was also late for class because I didn't want to risk getting in trouble if I stayed out too late. The next thing that happened caught me completely off guard. The custodian made his way over to where I was standing and stopped when he was less than a foot away. I could feel his breath on me. He was that close. The back of my neck started to tingle and I couldn't avoid looking at him because of how uncomfortable I felt. "What the hell, dude?" It was my voice. His expression was stone cold, and then he gave me a smile I'll never forget for all the wrong reasons. On my way back to the lecture, I had a perplexing thought. My only thought was that he was completely insane. When I got back to class, I texted my friend about it, and he said he'd had a similar experience with the same janitor. He told me he agreed with me that the guy was creepy and that he intended to report him to the principal that day, but we never got around to it. After school, my friend Elias and I, along with another mutual friend, Peyton, set out on foot. We engaged in that activity frequently. We frequently visited local eateries, fast food joints, and even parks. After school, we would do anything and everything, and it would usually be the best time of our lives. We all agreed that today was the day to visit our favorite diner. To get to the restaurant, we had to take a path that began on school property and ended in a residential area. The trails were not required, but they made our after-school strolls much more pleasant and expedient 90% of the time. Peyton joined in as Elias and I were discussing the creepy janitor. He was familiar with the janitor in question, but had never interacted with him. If you explain to Peyton why that man was so creepy, he may start to get it. I kid you not. It was like we were discussing him. The janitor must have given birth to him or something. It wasn't quite a paradox, but the irony and strangeness were off the charts. We could see a man up ahead, far off in the distance. Peyton exclaimed, "No way. Dude, isn't that him, the school janitor?" We stared at him in disbelief and terror until we were finally able to identify him with absolute certainty. "Let's go back," Peyton said. I made no response. Instead, both Elias and I kept walking. We passed him on the sidewalk, and he turned to stare at us, but we continued on our way. The custodian then called out to us and inquired whether or not we were interested in having a social gathering. This guy was the school janitor, so he was supposed to be a respectable adult figure, but he turned out to be a total creep. At the very least, he was 55 years old. I don't understand why he would want to hang out with kids our age. We initially disregarded him and merely increased our pace, but when he began jogging towards us, we broke into a full-on sprint. Then he started yelling at us, and when I turned around, I saw that he was holding a knife. We ran and screamed for at least 5 minutes, but we couldn't find him afterward. The next day at school, we learned the truth about who he was. Elias, Peyton, and I went up to the school with our parents to inform the principal and police of the situation. It turned out that nobody at the school recognized him and that he wasn't employed there as a janitor. He was a man dressed as a janitor. It's ridiculous and scary that he was able to do all of that inside the school without being discovered for so long. Security measures should be beefed up significantly because schools should be a secure environment in which students can learn without fear. As it turned out, The man was also a convicted sex offender who had been abusing minors for quite some time. Even though he was required by court order to keep his distance from children, he did not. To be honest, I think he was planning to try and kill one of us this time around. Mental instability of some people is beyond my ability to fathom. We were all frightened and shaken by the encounter with the creepy janitor. A person with such a disturbing history, pretending to be a janitor at our school, was unfathomable to us. This led us to wonder how he could have fooled so many people for so long, and whether or not the current security measures were adequate. After the incident, the school's administration moved swiftly to address the situation. They increased security by performing extensive background checks on all employees and requiring visitors to present proper identification at all times. The incident also prompted the institution to teach its students about the importance of being aware of their surroundings and speaking up if they see anything suspicious. A thorough investigation was launched, and local schools were warned to be on high alert. They caught the fake custodian right away and arrested him for disobeying a court order and trespassing on school property. He was arrested, and his case highlighted the critical nature of taking security measures to protect school community members. This event marked a watershed moment in our understanding of the importance of looking out for each other's safety. We began keeping closer tabs on our surroundings and immediately reporting anything out of the ordinary to the administration. Teachers, parents, and students all came together after the incident to make our school a safer place for everyone. Me and my pals were profoundly affected by the event. We learned that it was crucial to keep an eye out for suspicious activity and to report it immediately. We came out of it stronger and more aware of our surroundings, but it was a difficult lesson to learn. We kept up our after-school strolls for the next few months, though we were careful to explore new areas each time. We were no longer complacent about our security and valued the increased sense of calm that the school's new safeguards provided. My desire to help others and make a difference in my community was also sparked by this incident. To help make my school a safer place, I joined a student-run safety committee and gave my input on how to do so. We made it a point to hold workshops and drills teaching students about safety in a variety of situations. While time alleviated our anxiety, the memory of that terrifying encounter never left our minds. Nonetheless, we redirected those feelings into constructive action by lobbying for safer schools and communities for the sake of both current and future students. The incident served as a wake-up call to the fact that danger can lurk even in seemingly safe places, but it also sparked efforts to improve things for the better. We learned the importance of standing together and raising our voices to prevent further violence at school. Moving forward, we remembered that ensuring everyone's safety is everyone's job. Our school is now a more secure and supportive environment thanks to our commitment to open dialogue and constant vigilance. We learned the importance of speaking up for what we believe in and taking responsibility for our safety and the safety of those around us. And while we'll never forget that terrifying encounter, it will always serve as a symbol of how far we've come and the change we've brought to our community. It was a regular day at school, like any other. I was probably a sophomore at the time. I'm guessing it was shortly after 3:00 p.m. lunchtime came around, and my pals and I were wasting time as usual. We'd sit down to eat for about 5 minutes and then spend the remaining 15 or so chatting, playing games, and generally having a good time. To be honest, it was pretty unsettling when the PA system suddenly went off about halfway through lunch and announced that we were in an emergency lockdown. This is a critical warning. Maintain lockdown conditions at this time. Turn off all lights and enter the nearest room or building, locking the door behind you. We were prepared for a lockdown because the principal would normally tell us ahead of time if it were just a drill. When Mr. Harrison announced the lockdown, he sounded a little panicked, as I recall. My friend assumed it was all part of his act to make it sound credible, but I had my doubts. Now, this is the stupidest thing I've ever done, and I still have no idea why my friends, and I thought it would be funny to sneak out of the cafeteria through a side entrance that led upstairs to one of the main hallways of our school after they shut off the power. I followed them for some reason I can't explain. I just felt like it. We dispersed after a short while of exploring the area, leaving just Andrew and me. The other 3 buddies went off on their own to explore. The hallways were so dim that we could hardly make out our shadows. The sun was the only source of illumination, but the day was overcast, so we didn't get very much illumination from the outdoors. Then, seemingly out of nowhere, we heard 3 gunshots in rapid succession, followed by yelling. Naturally, Andrew and I began to panic, and we bolted outside and ran as fast as we could. I'm relieved we weren't trapped inside the building, and I'm glad we were so close to the main entrance. But here we were in front of the school, where we could be easily spotted by the authorities. We didn't want to get caught sneaking out of school, so we made a beeline for the woods behind the building. There was a soccer field between us and our destination, but we were able to cross it undetected. The police sirens then grew louder and closer. I assumed they were there to catch whoever had just fired the gun, but we couldn't shake the feeling that the school or the police might be on the lookout for us as well. Those friends of mine have gotten in trouble for truancy in the past, so I was understandably anxious about everything going on at the time. Because of the gravity of the situation, we spent some time panicking and trying to calm each other down. We didn't want the police or anyone else to think we were involved with the armed psycho, even though the police weren't looking for us. They didn't know we were missing, and neither did anyone at the school. We pushed our luck by staying hidden, and the police eventually found us during a routine search of the building. We were eventually located by the police, and we were held until they apprehended the real criminal they were after. The kid who fired the shots was a year younger than me and attended a different school. Thankfully, no one was hurt, but the kid claimed he had come to kill a girl in particular. There's something odd I want to mention quickly. This kid and I look eerily alike. We were both 5 feet tall, had similar hair color and cuts, and wore nearly identical outfits. After we explained everything, however, the police quickly realized that it was unrelated. That day, I learned my lesson. After that day, the seriousness of emergencies and the need to avoid reckless actions were constantly brought to mind by the incident. I realized that life can take unexpected and potentially dangerous turns, and while nobody was hurt, I felt incredibly lucky. The incident also prompted in-depth safety reviews and new emergency procedures at the school and with local authorities. They did their best to keep everyone informed and calm during lockdowns and other emergencies by spreading the word effectively. After our rash decision to leave during the lockdown was discovered, my friends and I had a long discussion about the repercussions of our behavior. We understood the danger we were putting ourselves and others in if the intruder or police had found us. After what happened, we resolved to put safety first and act more responsibly. As a result, we began to consider the effects of our choices on ourselves and those around us. We emphasized the importance of safety and urged our peers to be on the lookout for any unusual behavior and report it immediately. As a result of the incident, there was more open dialogue between students and faculty. We felt the need for a confidential forum where we could air our grievances and share any information that might improve school security. The school administration encouraged these discussions and set up channels where students could report threats or safety issues anonymously. Tension and fear eventually dissipated as the weeks progressed, but the lessons we'd learned remained with us. The school and police department held safety seminars and workshops where we learned useful information and techniques for handling crises. The event also sparked a newfound desire in me to take political action. I felt compelled to speak out for safer schools and communities, both locally and nationally. I became involved in community safety initiatives and volunteered at community events that promoted security and personal safety education. What I learned from it is how crucial it is to always be ready for the unexpected. The lockdown procedures and a fully charged phone with emergency contacts are 2 things I always make sure to have on hand. With time, I felt compelled to warn my fellow students by relating my story. I stressed the importance of having faith in the school administration and not taking any chances during times of crisis. When I think back to that day, I am thankful for the opportunity I was given. It dawned on me how drastically the course of my life could have altered with just one rash choice. It drove home how fleeting life is and how crucial it is to appreciate every moment and choice. I have kept the lessons I learned from that experience close to me throughout the years that have passed. I decided to start campaigning for greater security, not just in educational institutions, but everywhere. I urged my loved ones to put safety first and to take all the precautions they could think of to shield themselves and others. Even though I never forgot what happened that day, the terror I felt has become a force for good in my life and the lives of those around me. It made me realize how important it is to make the world a better, more secure place for everyone. In the end, I took away the lesson that we must always be ready for the unexpected because life is unpredictable. It prompted me to put my own and others' safety first when making decisions. As I moved forward in life, I realized that this event would have a lasting impact on my outlook and actions, leading me down the road of accountability, awareness, and advocacy for a safer, more compassionate world. On my very last day of high school, this happened. After today, I would have completed my final day of high school as I was a senior. I was thrilled and relieved, but I also felt a pang of regret that day, because all it meant was that I would have to leave my high school friends behind and start fresh in a new environment at college. I made an effort to see it as just another part of life, another change, and not take it so personally. Aline, I was in a particularly foul mood that day due to domestic drama. I can't quite put my finger on what happened. It was 5 o'clock, probably biology. The course itself wasn't bad, but the instructor was a real downer. I, along with many of my classmates, had a terrible experience with Mr. Johnson. How he wasn't let go sooner is beyond me. He often got into yelling matches with the kids and had a reputation for doing so. Twice, he threatened me in front of the whole class, and once he even broke a kid's phone. Even though I don't think he teaches there anymore, I decided not to show up to his class because I just didn't feel like it. I went to the library to hide out there until the 6th period. I sat in the library's back computer area, where no one would ever look, and pretended to study while playing games on my phone. Not long after that, the intercom alarm sounded throughout the building. There was a lockdown going on. Despite my initial alarm, I reasoned that it must have been a school drill and that we were being tested once again. I took a chance and waited because our school holds at least 2 drills every semester. But then, out of nowhere, I heard yelling coming down the corridor. The sound was so faint that I couldn't make out the words. Only the screams reached my ears. It felt like a couple of minutes passed. I soon became convinced that we were actually in a lockdown. In a state of panic, I decided that hiding under the computer desks in the library was my best option. I know it's not ideal, but it seemed like a good option compared to the alternative. I remained silent while waiting for the PA to come back on and announce that the drill was over, but it never came. It felt like 20 minutes, but all I did was lie there in terror. At one point, I checked my phone and saw that I had over 20 messages from my biology classmates concerned for my safety and inquiring as to the severity of the lockdown. Then my stomach dropped and I felt sick to my stomach. I reassured everyone that I was fine and hiding out in the library. Oddly enough, when I first walked into the library, I was the only patron. Neither teachers nor students were present. It did, however, scare me even more that I was essentially alone. I just kept hoping that the ordeal would end soon. That, however, was merely the start. When I first started missing classes, I had no idea what I was getting myself into. A few more minutes passed, and then I heard someone running down the hall, and then the screaming resumed. That's when my worst nightmares started to unfold. Someone walked through the open door of the library. Although I was frightened, I dared to lift my head and look up to see who it was. However, all I could make out was the dark silhouette of a person who appeared to be about my height. I ducked back under the desk and noticed a flashlight being activated. Whoever it was immediately set out to look for the source. I only remember asking God to please make everything all right. I was sitting in a cubicle with a bunch of computers, and eventually, someone came over to talk to me. I waited for him to look up from his desk, but I knew it was only a matter of time before he did. "Hello," I called out. A second later, I had a gun and a flashlight pointed in my direction. The question I had for Tyler was, "What the hell are you doing, man?" I had a good friend in middle school named Tyler, but we hadn't talked much since we both started high school. We had a falling out and drifted apart over the years. Anyway, I told him to drop the weapon, and after almost a minute of blubbering, he finally did so and collapsed to the floor. I kicked the gun out of his hands and assured him everything would be fine, then explained that we had to do the right thing and that he should surrender to the authorities if he wanted a chance at rehabilitation. Against my expectations, he followed my advice and we headed for the office, where he eventually located a teacher who in turn contacted the police. I, as a witness, gave them all the information at my disposal and Tyler cooperated fully. I'm just grateful that Tyler chose me as his partner. To be honest, I'm pretty sure Tyler would have killed anyone else he considered a friend if he had found them. We need to get the word out about this problem and do everything we can as a society to reduce school shootings. While I do not condone Tyler's actions, I recognize that he was a vulnerable child who likely suffered from several mental health issues, bullying, and a terrible home life. If you give it some thought, his actions are not surprising. Typically, things work out like that. To say the least, the fact that some people are capable of such atrocities is deafening and horrifying, but we must exert maximum effort to forestall their occurrence. The school and surrounding community rallied around each other in the days following the terrifying lockdown incident. Students, faculty, and staff who had been affected by the tragedy were offered counseling. We shared our concerns, emotions, and strategies for moving forward. Mental health professionals have been called in to assess Tyler, the troubled student who brought the gun to school. It became clear that he was experiencing serious mental health issues and had been dealing with a variety of emotional challenges for a very long time, most of which had gone unnoticed. The tragedy was a sobering reminder of the need to increase understanding of mental health issues and to better assist those with such conditions. Security was beefed up. Lockdown procedures were refined, and the school provided students with more access to mental health services in the weeks following the incident. The group banded together to make the neighborhood a better, more secure place for everyone. Discussions about gun control and school safety were also sparked by the event. There was a call for stricter regulations to prevent future tragedies like this one, and people wondered how people with mental health issues could get their hands on firearms. Over the following months, people's initial shock and fear gradually faded. The lockdown incident would leave a lasting impression on students and faculty members. Many of us changed, learning the value of solidarity, compassion, and mutual. Although tragic, Tyler's story highlighted the importance of being alert to the signs of distress in others and extending a helping hand to those who may be in need. We learned from this incident that we shouldn't ignore pleas for help or brush off unsettling actions. Instead, we've learned to show compassion and rally around one another. Some of my high school friends and I have maintained contact over the years since graduation. We carried each other's pain as we persisted in our efforts to raise consciousness about mental health and strengthen gun control laws after that tragic day. A few of us joined groups that help violence victims and work to improve our local communities. The incident was a major factor in my decision to study psychology in college. I realized that by learning more about mental health, I could help those like Tyler before they spiral into violence through prevention and intervention. I hope that through my education and community service, I could make a difference, not just in the classroom but in people's lives generally. I've been a part of campaigns to get the word out about mental health and get more people the help they need as soon as possible. I've always wanted to be an advocate for improving school safety and talking about mental health in the classroom. Although this was a difficult time in my life, I am now dedicated to doing my part to make the world a better, safer, and more compassionate place for everyone. When I think back to that day, I realize how precarious and vulnerable life is. However, there are many chances to make a positive impact. We can build a kinder and stronger community by speaking up, pushing for protection, and helping those in need. I remembered that lockdown incident as a reminder of the power we have to affect positive change and look out for one another as I continued on my journey through life, rather than as a source of fear. I hoped by telling my story, others would be moved to take action, raise awareness about mental health, and work toward a world in which nobody ever has to go through what I did.